You've probably heard of it. Maybe you've even talked about it. The male gaze. It often gets written off as just a simple biological reflex, something that just kind of happens. But what if the science tells us a much more interesting story? Today, we're going to follow the data and find out where our eyes really go. So let's just jump right into the big question, right? Is this male gaze really just a hardwired, uncontrollable instinct? I mean, that's the common assumption, but as we're about to see the actual data, well, it tells a much more surprising story. To get past all the assumptions and opinions, researchers had to figure out a way to literally see through someone else's eyes. They needed a tool that could scientifically track something as quick and subconscious as a glance. And lucky for us, they found one. What they used is this incredible tool called eye tracking technology. Now, this isn't guesswork. This tech lets researchers see with pinpoint accuracy exactly where a person's eyes land, what they look at next, and for how long. It basically replaces, "I think they looked," with, "Here's exactly where they looked." Okay, so before we go any further, we need to get our terms straight, just so we're all on the same page. In these studies, scientists use the term sexual gaze. Now, this isn't just any look. It's a very specific, body-focused look at the chest and pelvic areas. It's the measurable scientific marker they use to study this phenomenon. So what did the eye trackers actually find? Well, at first, the data seemed to confirm what a lot of people might expect. Men did in fact spend more time looking at the bodies of women in revealing clothes. And yeah, this was way more pronounced in men than in women. But here's a fascinating little detail. The very first place their eyes landed was almost always on the face before shifting anywhere else. Okay, so with that data, it seems pretty straightforward, doesn't it? Seems like an open and shut case. A simple, predictable, biological reflex. End of story. But hold on. Here's where things get really interesting. See, if it were a pure automatic reflex like blinking when something comes at your face, you'd expect it to be the same for everyone, every single time. And it turns out that's not what the research found at all. Because when you dig just a little bit deeper, the data reveals a much, much more complex picture. It turns out this whole thing isn't nearly as automatic as it first looks. In fact, this single quote, which is a synthesis of the research, is really the key to the whole thing. This response is not universal or automatic and is influenced by individual, social, and contextual factors. Let's just let that sink in. It's not universal, and it's influenced. Something else is going on here. So just how confident are scientists about this more complicated story? Let's actually look at the strength of the evidence for both sides of this. This table breaks it down perfectly. Take a look at that top row. The claim that men gaze more at the bodies of women in revealing clothes, the evidence is strong, like a 9 out of 10. That's a solid, consistent finding across lots of studies. But now, look at that second row. The claim that this gaze is not fully automatic, that other factors matter. The evidence for that is moderate, a 7 out of 10. No, that's really significant. It tells us there's a real, measurable variation happening. So if it's not just automatic, then what are these other factors? What's pulling the strings? Well, it turns out that context is absolutely key. Both the world inside our heads and the world around us play a huge role. And these influences really fall into two big camps. First, you've got the individual factors. This is the stuff going on inside a person. Things like their own personal attitudes about women, or how much sexualized media they've seen in their life. That internal stuff really matters. And then you've got the external factors. Think about the social setting. Is it a boardroom or a beach party? The cultural norms and what's seen as appropriate in that moment can totally change the behavior. Okay, let's step back for a second and put all these pieces together. We've got the initial observation, but we've also got this crucial, complicating nuance. So what does the whole picture look like? It really boils down to this simple 3-step understanding. 1, yes, the tendency absolutely exists. The data on that is very clear. 2, and this is the big one, it is not an uncontrollable reflex. It's not some biological command you can't ignore. And 3, because it's not a reflex, it means it's influenced, it's shaped by our own attitudes and by the social world around us. So if you remember just one thing from all of this, let it be this. The research shows that the sexual gaze is a tendency, not a destiny. It's a behavior that, yeah, it's common, but it's clearly shaped and changed by a whole lot of other forces. And that leaves us with a really big and pretty important question to think about. If our gaze isn't just some automatic impulse we can't control, but instead it's something influenced by our attitudes and our environment, what does that say about personal and even social responsibility?